There is a specific moment in your life that you will probably never forget. That silent instant where you walk into a crowded room and something happens without you doing a thing. It's not that you said something brilliant. It's not that you made a dramatic gesture or drew attention through noise and movement. Actually, you were just there, quiet, observing. And suddenly people started behaving differently in your presence. The conversation shifted its tone. Bodies slightly repositioned themselves. Someone asked for your opinion, even though you hadn't raised your hand. It's as if you emitted an invisible frequency that altered the electromagnetic field of that space. Most people spend their entire lives chasing presence through noise, talking, exaggerated gesturing, through performances that demand wasted energy. And they never manage to achieve what you experienced in that moment simply by being quiet. That is the power of the ghost.
And you probably brushed off that power as something accidental, as luck, as a fleeting moment that means nothing. You are absolutely wrong. If you're here watching this video, it's because you recognize on some deep level that there is a fundamental difference between making noise and being heard, between taking up space and commanding space, between being present and leaving a mark in the air that lingers even after you've left the room. That recognition isn't random. It's your mirror neurons detecting something that science is just beginning to understand about how human presence works at the most primitive level of our cortex. If you aren't subscribed to the Mr. Nan channel yet, subscribe now, because what I'm going to reveal today will challenge everything you've been taught about what it means to have influence. Here is the brutal truth that no one wants to admit. Your compulsive need to do something, to say something, to constantly justify yourself through action and speech is not an admirable character trait. It is a neurobiological flaw. It is a glitch in your autonomic nervous system. And this glitch was built by the exact same mechanisms that helped your ancestors survive, but which are now sabotaging you every single day. You are not being lazy when you feel paralyzed by inaction. You are not being a coward when you choose to stay quiet instead of filling every silence with words. You are experiencing what neuroscientists call hyperactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, coupled with a dysfunction in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is the exact neurobiological recipe for the obsessive need to do, to prove yourself, to justify yourself, to be constantly in motion, because your brain is interpreting stillness as death. The villain here isn't laziness. The villain is your own nervous system, functioning exactly as evolution programmed it to, like a soldier who keeps firing even after the war is over. Think of the structure of your brain as a dual organism. You have the sympathetic nervous system, which is basically a neurobiological firefighter that exists for one single reason: to make sure you don't die. When this system activates, it sees stillness as vulnerability. It sees inaction as risk. It sees silence as an empty void that desperately needs to be filled. So it triggers adrenaline. It spikes your heart rate. It sends your thoughts spiraling in search of an action to calm that chronic anxiety. And the action your body can execute the fastest, the most automatically, is speech, movement, doing. Because when you are doing, when you are speaking, your nervous system interprets that as proof that you are still alive and relevant. The structure is elegant and horrifying. It's a prisoner who has convinced himself that his cell is a palace, and the more he bangs on the walls to prove it, the more the walls close in around him. Now, the central metaphor that will completely reorganize the way you view stillness is this.
You are an ancient tree in a dense forest. Ancient trees don't conquer the forest through noise and movement. They conquer through deep roots, through a silent presence that literally alters the soil where other trees are trying to grow. The ancient tree isn't doing anything visible, but its simple existence, its roots, its mass, its neurobiological density of having been there for decades, changes the humidity, changes the chemical composition, creates shade that shapes who gets to flourish or die in that space. All the other young shrubs are shaking their branches, rustling their leaves, trying to prove themselves. The ancient tree just exists. And that existence is so powerful that the surrounding trees organize their own structures around its presence. That is the metaphor. You don't need to do anything. You just need to be so solid, so rooted in who you are, so dense in your own sense of existence that your mere presence alters the behavior of the people around you. The practical framework for developing this power starts not with action, but with deactivation. You first need to learn to recognize when your sympathetic system is hijacked, when your need to do is actually anxiety disguised as productivity. And that detection is the first move. Sit comfortably in a space where you would normally feel compelled to speak or act or fill some void. A room with other people is ideal. Notify your body that you are safe. Use slow diaphragmatic breathing because the only master switch for the sympathetic system is your parasympathetic system, and it only activates when you teach your body that you can breathe slowly and still not die. Breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold it for 7. Exhale through your mouth for 8. Your body needs to receive this information thousands of times before it truly believes that stillness is safe. But every time you practice this, you are literally rewiring the synapses between your amygdala and your ventromedial prefrontal cortex. You are teaching your nervous system that it doesn't need to trigger a fight response against an enemy that doesn't exist. The second move is learning to interpret stillness not as emptiness, but as density. When you're in a room and you feel that compulsion to speak, that weight in your chest telling you that you need to do something, recognize that you are experiencing an illusion. Stillness is not an empty void. Stillness is where most people are walking around with an activated nervous system, trying to interpret who you are, why you aren't talking, what you are thinking. Your quietness creates a vacuum of uncertainty in other people's minds, and human beings are terrified of uncertainty. They fill that vacuum with a narrative about you. And if you don't fill that space with your voice, with your performance, you allow them to create a narrative that is often more powerful, more mysterious, more magnetic than anything you could have said. Mystery is a neurobiological tool. It keeps people hooked on you because their mirror neurons are working in overdrive trying to decipher a code you haven't revealed. The third move, and this is where most people fail, is learning to be comfortable with the discomfort of being misunderstood. You're going to walk into rooms where people will think you're arrogant for being quiet. They'll think you're insecure. They'll try to fill your silence with their own projected anxiety. And you'll feel the visceral compulsion to correct that interpretation, to say something that proves you're a nice person, that you're smart, that you're worthy of being in that space. That is the exact moment where your power is being born and assassinated all at once. When you resist that compulsion, when you stay quiet, even while feeling that internal pressure, you are telling your nervous system something profoundly revolutionary. You are willing to be misunderstood for the sake of being genuine. And that willingness is a neurobiological force so rare, so energetically expensive, that it emits a frequency people can feel at the most primitive level of their nervous system. They can't explain why they're fascinated by you. They just feel that you're different. The fourth move is learning to use stillness as a tool of power, not as the absence of action. You'll start to notice that when you don't speak, when you just observe with a neutral expression, people start competing for your attention. They start trying to impress you. They start behaving in a way that's more character-based and less performance-based. It's as if your quietness has revealed a mirror, and the people around you are seeing themselves more clearly. This isn't magic, it's neurobiology. When you aren't triggering other people's defensive responses through your own projected anxiety, they have more cognitive capacity to genuinely connect with you. Your silence is an invitation for them to rest from their own performances too. But here is where people invariably fail in application. You're going to try to use this framework, and you'll feel invisible. You'll feel like nothing is working, because you were taught to measure your influence through metrics that don't exist when you're being quiet. You were taught to believe that influence is noise. Influence is visibility. Influence is being upfront all the time. And when you practice stillness, you enter a period where your influence is being reorganized. But you can't measure that reorganization because it's happening at the level of other people's nervous systems, not at the level of your performance. So you give up. You go back to the compulsion of talking and doing and proving, because the immediate feedback is more rewarding than sitting in a silence where you can't gauge if it's working. The solution to this is to trust what neuroscience has already proven. The human brain is magnetized by uncertainty, by mystery, by a calm presence. An executive walks into a room and yells and talks a lot, and people tune him out because his behavior triggered neurobiological resistance in everyone around him. An executive walks into the same room, sits down calmly, observes, asks brief questions, and waits for the answers in deep silence. And those same people obey him before he has even asked for anything. What's the difference? The second executive learned that power isn't about taking up auditory space. Power is about taking up neurobiological space. Your silence is literally creating more activation in other people's nervous systems than all the noise you could possibly make. Imagine yourself 5 years from now continuing with the old pattern. You're still talking too much in meetings. You're still filling silences because you feel the constant need to prove you're worth listening to. You're still wasting energy on non-stop performance, on justifications, on trying to make people understand who you really are, because you don't trust the power of what they can infer when you just allow them to be in your presence. You'll reach 50 years old, and you will have spent the equivalent of 25 full-time years just trying to manage the anxiety of being quiet, being observed, being an enigma to other people. You'll have built relationships based on your continuous performance, not on your true nature. And every time you drop the act, people will pull away, because they never connected with who you truly are. Now, imagine the alternative path. You spend the next 6 months applying this framework. You walk into rooms with the clear understanding that your quietness is an asset, not a liability. You allow people to feel confused about who you are for a while, because that confusion is the exact trigger that will make their brains more engaged. You find out that people start seeking you out, not because you impressed them with your brilliance and your talking, but because you emit a presence that is rare, that is solid, that is different from all the performative anxiety they live with every single day. Your relationships start to have depth because you are allowing people to coexist with you in their own insecurities, in their own silence, instead of constantly trying to fill every space with your voice. And you discover that when you finally do speak, when you express something, when you share a perspective after weeks or months of just listening and observing, your impact is multiplied exponentially because you earned credibility not through noise, but through depth. The power of the ghost is the realization that you don't need to do anything to be somebody. You don't need to prove anything to be worth something. You don't need to be constantly visible to be influential. The ghost is invisible, but it's the most powerful thing in a story. The ghost rearranges the environment through its simple existence. People can't see it clearly, but they feel its entire presence. People fear it even without ever actually having a conversation with it. You are seeking to be the ghost when you should be seeking to be the ancient tree. You are trying to be seen when you should be trying to be felt. If you've watched this far, you've already felt this calling. You already know on some primitive level of your nervous system that there is another way to be in the world that isn't this continuous performance, this continuous justification, this continuous need to speak and do to prove you exist. Subscribe to the Mr. Nan channel today, because the next videos I create will dive deeper into every aspect of this framework, and you'll have the opportunity to rebuild your relationship with quietness, with silence, with the silent presence that moves mountains. The first step is one you need to take today. The first step is for you to recognize that your nervous system was betrayed by evolution, and that you have the power to reprogram it. That power is in you right now. You just need to be quiet enough to hear it.